Welcome to the Redvee TV show, supported by Chapel House Cars for the 2024 season. And with no game this weekend, Kev, we thought we'd just do a little bit of a state of the play type show.
Yep.
Discussing where we're at in terms of the season and where we are moving forward.
Well, personally, or the team. I mean, how are you, Dave? Are you all right halfway through the season?
I've been better. How about you?
I'm great, and I've been feeling a bit off this weekend, but yeah, feeling a bit better today, but feeling great in general.
Yes. So if there's one takeaway you take from this show today, get in touch with a mate and ask how they are.
Correct answer.
Right. This is where we're at, Kevin. 15 games in. Wigan lead the way. And you're probably going to have to say that chances are they're going to stay there, aren't they? Especially given the amount of home games they've got to come in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've kind of mentioned it for most of the season. That they're going to be the ones that are up there, and the ones that you've got to. If you finish above Wigan, you're going to finish top, aren't you?
Are we playing? And I don't want to sound defeatist for just the top two spot. You get that home tie, home semi-final potentially if you get there in the playoffs.
Listen, I think that you can still top Wigan. I think that is possible because they've got a game that they've got to try and fit in somewhere. It looks unlikely, I will say that much. So I think our aim has just got to be top two, and try and keep the likes of Hull KR and Warrington and Salford, Catalan at bay, because they're the four that you're obviously worried about being the four that are properly in contention. I know Leeds have changed the coach, but I still think they need a lot of work going forward to be worrying us, especially 6 points behind at this stage. This will be the bit that's clipped. Unless we properly fall away, I still think we'll have enough to win 4 more games than Leeds do over the course of the season.
Yeah. It's not all doom and gloom. Most points scored, least points conceded. Number 3 in meter makers in the league. I think Hull KR and Warrington are the teams who've made more than us. A surprising one for me, most clean breaks. But we're only number 6 in offloads. But do have to quantify that. Who do you think has the least amount of offloads in the league?
Wigan.
London.
It was going to be one or the other. Yeah.
Which bizarrely says stats aren't everything. Like a bikini.
Yes, correct. But do you remember after round 2 when I think I gave us like a 7 out of 10 for nil-in Huddersfield, and I said I wasn't falling in love with us, and I got a little bit of pushback on that, saying it was a great performance for a round 2. I think because I've watched things for so long, you kind of know that a season isn't always going to go as you expect, and I think social media gives people a platform. Hopefully, we give people a platform to discuss things as well. But there's bits of the season that have been games, performances that have been well below par and well worthy of a kicking. But other bits that you think, well, hang on, in round 2, everybody was really excited about us. Everybody was thinking, well, we've gone over to Huddersfield, we've nilled them, we've put a proper performance down at what can be a tough place to go. And you look at the games like Warrington in the Cup, that was a proper stinker, wasn't it? And I know we've got the Super League table, but that was a stinker. You've got the Huddersfield game at home that we won 13-12, which wasn't a great performance at all, despite us getting the win. Hull KR away and Salford away obviously speak for themselves. I think we were the second best team in both of those. Now, people will probably point at Catalan away, but we're a Lewis dog getting the ball down half a metre further towards a try line in that game. And wasn't too fussed because that is obviously a very, very tricky place to go and try and get the win. So there's been bits that you think the proper honking performances, but on the main, is it worth really, really throwing your toys out the pram with how this season's gone? I don't
I
think so
think
at the minute.
there is a little bit of case of, listen, my eyes see what my eyes see. But I say, out of them 4 defeats, 2 of them were to Salford by 2 and 4 points. One of
Yeah,
them was to Catalan away by 6. And the only real bad league defeat was the 40-20 at Hull KR. And we
yeah,
said before we went there, this could be a really tough game. And listen, you've picked out a couple of games there where we've won narrowly as well, so they probably do even themselves out. But it is fine margins, and I think the standard of the top 5, top 6 have risen this season. Obviously, Warrington have rejoined it, you'd have to say, from, well, at least in the first half of the year. Salford are going really well. Hull KR are going really well. And there's probably going to be that little bit of a divide between the top 6 and the bottom 6, isn't there?
yeah. And we've no divine right to just always be up there. You've got to earn that, haven't you? But when you look at the season in perspective, I like looking at it from kind of outside the bubble as well. So Love Rugby League did their scoring for each team over the first half of the season, and their columnist gave Saints an A-. Said that Saints will probably be very happy with their opening 15 games, but know that they can get better heading into the final games of the season. And I think that kind of sums it up. The issue is the consistency of making sure that you are performing against those better teams. Because we're mentioning, obviously, we beat Wigan on Good Friday, but we've lost handsomely to Hull KR, who were 3rd. We lost handsomely in the Cup to Warrington, who are 4th. We've been beaten, albeit one with 12 men, but still beaten. You can't look at it any other way. By Salford twice. We've been beaten away and won at home against Catalan. So we know we can get better. We know we can get more consistent. But I think when you're properly in that bubble, you can kind of get carried away a little bit. And looking at it from an objective point of view, I don't think it's as bad as people make out, or
No,
some people, the minority make out, I'll say.
I think we've got obvious problems, deficiencies in our backline with the lack of pace, which we'll get onto in a minute. But I think the real kicker for us this season has been, well, if you've got them deficiencies in your backs, you need your forwards to carry you. And we have had absolutely tremendous bad luck with long-term injuries, haven't we? Obviously, we've come in to the season, we were missing Parsi for the first 12 weeks or so. Alex Walmsley suffered injury. Joe Batchelor long-term, Morgan Knowles, Jake Wingfield, Matt Whitley. That's 5 or 6 players who you'd expect to be in your 17.
Yeah, it's completely right. I know the teams get those types of injuries as well. So for us to be in second place after carrying quite a few, as you say, starting players injured, or at least first 17 injured, I'm not overly concerned in the immediacy with how we've gone so far this season.
Okay, before we move on to the squad then, Kev, Paul Wellens. New contract?
Yes.
I'm firmly in the keep Paul Wellens camp. I think the next couple of years, like it or not, we're going to be in a transition period. He's keeping us in and around the top spot. I don't see how replacing him changes anything. For me, I think the club needs to come out and say 2 or 3 years, Paul Wellens is going to be our coach, and he's going to see us through and get these young players into the team who we need.
Yeah, I think that would be wise. Whether it will happen, I don't know, but that'd be wise from the club. Same, I don't know who comes in to replace him. I know Saints fans might be looking at the other coaches and might know a little bit more about the NRL. People will obviously go back to we should get Christian Wolf. He's not going to come back. Justin Holbrook, he's not going to come back. Stop harking on for them. I think Wello is the best man that we could have at the moment. because if you sack him and then take a risk on an NRL assistant, there's no saying it's going to be pretty. There's no saying it's going to work, and he will still be under the same kind of situation of having to bring some young players through as well as manage what we have described as a squad that's getting a little bit older and making sure that you are replacing those and keeping those pathways open for your younger lads.
I think from the outside world looking in as well, if you look at that league table and going, we're sacking our coach, what would that say about us as a club?
Yeah, it just looked like, do they know what they're doing? Does the left hand know what the right's doing here? We're not that far off it. We could end up that we're 4 points behind Wigan when they play their game in hand, but we're ticking along nicely. As long as we don't drop out of the playoffs, and that's when a question would be asked, and it's fair enough to be asked. But the fact that we're in second, I think at the minute, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, we've obviously got Cass this week coming up, and then we've got away games against Warrington and Wigan. You'd like to see us win at least one of them two, wouldn't you? Cass or Wire or Wigan. I think Wire is obviously the one you'll probably target first of all, and Wigan away probably a bit of a free hit.
Yeah, derbies can go weirdly. We always hark back, and no doubt we will do when we preview the game to when they had all the kids out and still managed to beat us. It can go any which way. So we could end up coming away with 2 points from that, from a narrow win. We could end up, as you say, just having a free hit at it and trying some things and seeing if they come off, and if they don't, never mind, move on to the week after.
Okay. Squad for next season, Kevin. And on there, I've put on when contracts are up, and in brackets, if they have an option on their deal of when it could possibly be extended to. Unfortunately, Lewis Dodd and Tommy Makinson have frozen out of that picture.
Is that the effect that you've gone for
there? So when people are calling for big squad turnover next season, I don't think you're going to get it. But there's an awful lot of players who are off contract at the end of 2025, and that's where you start needing to make some decisions for 2026 moving forward.
Yeah. You look at the players that you've got outlined in red there, and when it comes to squad turnover, I'm going to say there aren't a lot of big earners on that list. I really don't think there are. I don't know if Sam Royal should possibly be in red as well. I don't know if he only signed a 1 year. I know you've got a question mark there against it, but that isn't screaming massive earners. Probably your biggest earners on there are Tommy and Sione. And Sione, there's the question mark over whether he goes. I think it's a no-brainer that if he wants that +1, you get him tied down to that ASAP.
Yeah, Sam Royal is a mistake on there, Kev. Well spotted. To be 2024. Who would you expect? I know this might sound harsh. I don't see Sam Royal here next season. I think for his own benefit and his own development, he needs to be playing.
Yeah.
I think he'll move on. Ben Lane, Mackenzie Buckley haven't made the breakthrough.
Yeah, and I think Ben Lane has. Well, they both obviously played first team. Ben's been playing at North Wales Crusaders, and Mackenzie, I think, has been over there as well. Yeah, it's almost a case of if you go like for like, is Noah Stevens your Mackenzie Buckley for this year? Is Harry Robertson your Ben Lane, who can play 1 and 6, and can play outside back as well? It just looks like that might be the natural progression. Yeah, Sam Royal, I think the time's probably come now for Sam to spread his wings and see what he wants to do. If he wants to stay in professional rugby, if he can get a deal, or because he is a very, very clever lad, to move into the science part of his life that he's been doing to such a high standard academically.
Wonga Blake?
I can see Wonga getting a new deal. I think what he had a slow start, which obviously was to do with not having a pre-season. You've not got to integrate him into the squad. He kind of gets it. Is he quite the star that you kind of want an NRL player to be? He's probably not up there with some of our greatest imports. I think that's fair to say at the minute, off the back of the dozen appearances he's made. He's not really hit the ground running, but you can see him getting better and better. And if he's got the right attitude now, I can almost see him being rewarded. It might just be a +1. It might be a 2025, and we kind of keep a gap open for someone a little bit further down the line to come in and take over from him. But I can see him staying in for continuity.
Now, Sione has an option for 2025 in his favour. There are rumours circulating that this might be his last year in Redvee. Maybe a couple of NRL clubs showing an interest in him, given his form. He's currently 28, so you feel if he wants to go back to the NRL at any time, this might be the chance he gets to go. I noticed his brother put on Bring Him Home to Newcastle Knights on his Instagram. I'm in the position where, like when we had an inkling that Tommy Makinson to Catalan might happen, I've got an inkling that Sione will probably return home at the end of the year.
Yeah, I almost think that decision's been made already and just not been communicated, which is fair enough. I know we like to keep our business quiet. It doesn't really help the fans because you want to see us recruiting and you want to see it's all about timing and perception. And you want to hear that Sione's renewed for next year. You want to hear that we've brought in a big, quick winger to take over from Tommy Makinson. You want to hear that we've brought in a centre or a prop or a 7 or a 9. Or you want to hear these things. With Sione, it's probably been made, and it probably is the right time if he's got them contract offers to go home. From a Saints point of view, you're 100% try and keep him here. You do whatever you can to keep him here because he's arguably been our player of the season so far.
And equally, you could probably say, if you manage to keep him for 2025 and he's approaching 30, the NRL chances might have gone. You might keep him for another 2 or 3 years on top of that. But obviously, it's a huge commitment. All of our overseas players bring in the families from the other side of the world. Sometimes family do come first as well, and you've got to weigh that into proceedings. Right then, 2 players we're going to discuss: John Bennison and Ben Davis.
Yep.
And we've discussed John Bennison off camera. I personally don't feel he's the long-term solution as a first choice winger. I don't think he's going to be first choice fullback at any time with Jack Wellesby in there. But as a squad player, would you be looking to renew him? Just because to come in on the fringes as a solid body, if that's what you want him to be, is he worth another year or 2? But do you have to balance that? Does John Bennison want to play first team every week and then look at his options elsewhere?
I think I actually said it after Salford that I didn't think John or T. Ritson were the answer as a starting winger in Super League. I stand by that. That's nothing personal against him. I think that John Bennison is a very, very hard-working player who's earned his place in the squad. But you're right, you need pace on a wing. If John is happy with a 1-year, 2-year deal to go to be a reserve fullback, possibly reserve winger, but you're looking mainly at fullback because you need the pace in the side. Then yeah, I'd offer him that. But he could be another one like Sam Royal who feels that he deserves more. And I wouldn't say that he's necessarily wrong. That he should probably be looking at making the breakthrough and nailing down a place of his own because he's not doing that at Saints, is he?
Obviously, in Super League, would you see John Bennison being first choice fullback winger?
It'd be fullback rather than wing. I don't think he'd be a first choice winger. I think, unfortunately for John, you're looking mid-table and lower. I don't think the likes of anybody in the current top six would be looking at him, would they?
I don't think he gets. He's not going to play fullback for Wigan. It's not going to be for Hull KR, Warrington, Salford. No, Catalan. No, Leeds. Leeds have
No,
signed. No,
no.
Huddersfield.
It depends with Huddersfield because they're a weird one because they keep on taking on players and taking risks on players, and not all of them kind of come off.
Cass.
Yeah,
Wakefield.
could see doing the job there. Yeah.
Is it a case of? Do you see a situation where we say to John, go and test the market, see what's out there contract wise, and we'll look at it. The figures.
Yeah, it could be a good way of doing it. I think the obvious issue is you need to make sure that in your kind of wider ranging squad, you've got players with that little bit of experience. You can't just have, once you get to say number 21 or 22, just a whole raft of kids coming in with like half a dozen appearances between the 10 of them.
Which brings us on to Ben Davies.
Yeah.
Ben Davies, for me, gets an awful lot of stick for someone who isn't in the team very much.
Yeah.
His squad number for me is probably reflective of where he sits in the pecking order. But he's sat on the fringes. He comes in. I don't think he lets you down. Does he do anything spectacular? No. But can you think of any situations where Ben Davies has actually let us down as a club? You need players like him around your squad.
Yeah, I think Ben is a victim of his own versatility at times. And I almost see him in the same way that people had a go at John Wilkin for playing 7, when John Wilkin put his hand up to say, well, I'll do it because we've got nobody else. Because Ben can play a bit of 6, and he isn't he's no like elusive runner like Bevan French. He's no real organizer like Johnny Lomax. He's a pair of hands who's got a kick on him as well. I think Ben Davies is worthy of another deal. Again, is he someone who could go out to a Salford or somewhere like that and get a deal? Absolutely. He doesn't want to be kicking his heels on the fringes. I'd give him a contract, and he was number 21. You're right. And I actually had a look at all the players who wore number 21 across Super League, and I'm looking at the likes of Matt Ikuvalu. Well, he's a good player for Catalan. You've got people like Junior and Semba, who's just come through at Wigan, looking great. But then you've got Sylvester Namo, Cass, Leroy Cudjoe, Huddersfield, Will Gardner, Hull, Corey Hall, Hull KR, Jack Sinfield, Jacob Jones, Robbie Story, Matty Foster, Sam Cassiano was given the 21 shirt at Warrington. That's the kind of level that you're looking at for wearing number 21. And I always say squad numbers are given out for a reason. You give your squad numbers out to mainly what you see as your strongest players. I think the only one that we've not mentioned there is Connie, who wears 23 because he doesn't want to wear one of the starting centre shirts, a number 3 as it would be. Who's another one we could discuss, because I think in isolation, would I give Connie a new deal? Probably not, no. Can I see him getting a new deal? Again, yeah, for continuity's sake. And yeah, we're talking about getting pace in the back line. You need to surround Connie with that pace then. You need to surround him with someone who will help him out an awful lot, like Tommy does in defence. Going forward, on his day, he's taking you forward. He's making post-contact meters till the cows come home. As he gets older, is his defence standing up to what we need it to be? That's where the question lies with him.
I've put the squad up for next season as it stands at this moment in time. I've seen things on social media saying Saints are skint. We're no skinter than we've been previously, really. At the end of the day, the club, as historically, if you listen, this isn't any secret. You can look at the accounts that the club publish each year, given to Companies House. We haven't been making a profit for many years, and we've been very, very lucky that we do have some benefactors who pump their money into the club to offset those losses. Obviously, with the deals we're making with Liverpool Football Club, sponsorship deals, use of the stadium, the aim is to make sure we are sustainable. But to say we are skinned when we spent 2.7 million on salaries this season, which is above the salary cap, and that's obviously including your marquees, we're not skint. You can argue that we haven't spent the money wisely, or we haven't got the right caliber of player. That's a perfectly fair comment to make if that's what you want to do. But to say we're not actually spending the money just isn't correct.
Yeah, I actually tried having a little look at the salary cap and kind of what it entails. And one thing that kind of popped out to me was the club trained allowance dispensation, that you can have a maximum of 100 grand dispensation, 5 grand for each club trained player who plays 10 matches that are covered under the salary cap in the preceding season. So your club trained is someone who has been on the club's register for 3 full seasons before the end of the season in which he ceases to be eligible for the under-21s. So I had a look through ours who would be, and obviously you've got Jack Wellesby, Tommy Makinson. So if it's 5 grand, we're losing 5 grand in dispensation for Tommy Makinson moving. So that's not 5. If Tommy Makinson is on, we'll say 105 grand a season, 100 grand appears on the cap and 5 grand doesn't. So it's not that you're not paying him it, but it means you're not having to put 105 on the cap. So you've got 5 grand to play with somewhere else on the cap. So we're losing that from him and Lewis Dodd definitely next season. You've got Mark Percival, obviously, John Bedison, question mark about whether we're going to lose that from him. Johnny Lomax, Matty Lees, Morgan Knowles. Jake Wingfield, if it's exactly as it's worded, Jake Wingfield's only played 9 games this season. If he doesn't play again this season, does 5 grand of his wage come off it? So we've got to manage that somewhere else on the cap rather than off the cap. George Delaney is already at 16 games this season. Sam Royal, again, he played 15 games last year. He's played 3 this time. So does he count because he's played them historically? I don't know, but it's a possibility that we're going to lose another 5 grand there. We might get it back with Noah Stevens because he's played 5. He needs to make 5 more appearances. So it's not just about the cap and we spend this much. It's about all the little bits on the side as well. As you mentioned, Marquee, as you mentioned, these dispensations that we've then got to, instead of having the 5 grand to play with for across these players, say all the players I've just mentioned and Noah Stevens only makes 8 appearances, we lose 25 grand's worth of wiggle room. If that is all right, 25 grand's worth of wiggle room is half a fringes of your 17 player. It's one of your young kids. In fact, it's probably more. It's probably 1 1/4 young lads coming through that you've got to pay for. It's tough, it's tough to balance the whole thing with the salary cap. Yeah, it was just like an interesting thing, and I was trying to read through it all, and when you just think, oh my god, I'm glad I don't have to do this every single week. I'm glad we only do one of these shows a year.
Do you know what? I'll give a plug here. 4020 magazine. If anybody gets a chance to pick up this month's copy, there's a 2-page spread about the role of the chief exec, basically, and what the role involves, and part of it is the salary cap and squad makeup, and it discusses like looking at the squad for say 2025, the squad for 2027, and how your squad's going to look as far ahead as 5 years' time in 2029. Now, this is a brief look of how I suspect our squad will look next season. I've put Moses there at 7 at the minute. The question is, if you're looking at the squad for the next 3 or 4 years, if you're expecting George Whitby and Harry Robertson to come in and potentially be your halves, especially, say, George Whitby, if you expect George Whitby to be playing 7 for Saints in 2026, and you've penciled him in for 2026 on your team chart, where do you stand then going to find someone for 2025 who is A, available, B, good enough, but C, free, whatever you want,
Yeah.
doesn't want a long-term contract that is going to prevent George Whitby taking his place in the team? There's no point having an academy and all of the resources we put in over 10, 12 years to develop these players, make them Saints players, and then not finding them a place in the team when the time comes when they're good enough.
Yeah, I think you're right about like the likes of that. If you're planning on George Whitby and people rave about George, all I'd say is just have caution. Don't build these young lads up into. And I'm not talking about you, Dave. I'm not talking
Yeah,
about you.
it's potential, yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is just potential at the moment. I'd just like to know that kind of on the other side of things, well, if we are looking at short-term deals because we think that Deon Sambu or Owen Dagnall is going to be our number 2 or number 5 in the next couple of years, we're going over to Christian Wolf and Justin Holbrook and our contacts in Australia and say, have you got anyone that can do it for 2 years for us? A young kid, young gun who's coming through, isn't going to make your team inside the next 2 years, but is Super League good enough. These guys are good quality judges of players. So I'd like to know we're doing that. But you're right. We pride, as a club, we pride ourselves on bringing local lads through and bringing them into the first team and having that local identity. I think sometimes, and again, it's the vocal minority who will say, yeah, they want Jamie Lyons in every single, in your centre positions and your reserve centre and the one behind him, that you want everybody to be like that. You want David Furley's to be your props and then your reserve props and so on. And you want Sione Matautas as your reserve second row. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah, you have to say as well, when we signed Lewis Dodd to a new deal at the end in 2022, if anybody goes back on social media on the club's official site, everybody was raving about Lewis Dodd signing a new deal, saying it was brilliant news for the club. He signed a 2-year contract till the end of 2024 with the option of extending until 2026. The club have pretty much planned for Lewis Dodd at that point to be the halfback for 3-4 years. Lewis not taking up the extension and moving to the NRL is what has put a spanner in our works in terms of not having the next off the production line quite ready in terms of age. So, and that's where the problem lies. I see a situation where we go into next season with Moses at 7 and we try and give George Whitby bits of game time, a little bit like Noah Stevens has had this season at prop, and George Whitby gets game time next season. I could almost see Harry Robertson getting some games at 6 as well, with Johnny Lomax mentoring him.
It wouldn't surprise me if Will Roberts didn't get a couple of games as well to see how he's going. It depends how he goes. He's been out a lot with Swinton. I think he played a couple of games over there. And then you're going to have to see how the likes of Jake Burns goes as well, because if you're moving Moses to 7, you either need to bring in a 9, more experienced 9 than Jake, or you need to give him time. And it's a little bit why I'm surprised that he didn't play against London, just to kind of see how he went with a full team out. And this is what you're doing. You're not playing alongside the lads that you've played reserves with. You're playing alongside the actual first team props who are available. You're telling Matty Lees when he's running onto the ball. You're giving George Delaney direction how to dummy half. You're the one taking control. You're deciding, right, I'm scooting here. I've seen a gap. I'm going for it. It didn't quite work. Don't let it get your head down. You're going to go again in 2, 3, 4 sets time. You're going to see that same gap. You're going to make 10 meters. So I can see Moses at 7. But you can't then make Darrell Clark do 80-minute games. This is where I start worrying about Morgan Knowles, Jake Winfield playing 9.
The issue for me, and listen, I'm just going to state the obvious here, it's the backs, isn't it? There's gaps there. They're the contract options and they're the out of contract. I don't see T. Ritson filling one of them starting spots, despite him having a deal. If there's anybody who wants to take him off our hands next season and T's willing to go, I could see that happening. It's just not worked out for him at the club, and quite honestly, it isn't going to. I just don't see it. Maybe listen, he'll probably start against Cass now,
I
but
think he will. I think he will start against Cass.
But I don't think it's a long term option. From the contract options, Connie, I'm 50-50 on. I think Sioni's gone. Will Roberts, I'd probably give another deal to because he's been highly rated. He's had injury. It might be worth just giving him another 12 months, a bit like we did with Matty Foster.
Well, he's got the +1, hasn't he? He's got the +1. So
from the outer contract, I think Wonga gets a deal, and because you don't want to be replacing that many backs, I think he'll play wing next season.
Yeah.
And then you're looking for a wing and a centre for me. And that's why I'm 50-50 whether Connie gets it. I think it depends what's out there. John Bennison, we've discussed. Ben Davis, we've discussed. I think Sam Royals is gone. Jake Burns, like you said, if Moses goes to 7, if we're not bringing someone in, you have to retain him. And then I think McKenzie and Ben Lane are probably gone. But I think we need to be in the market for backs. But it's what is available, isn't it? You don't want to be in a situation where we panic and bring someone in for the sake of bringing someone in. And listen, we see there are other clubs signing players, but some of it will come down to it. They've got that room on the salary cap, and they want to spend that much money on that position.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where people might be in a better position than us because, as you say, it's not that we haven't got the money to spend, it's we've not got the room under the salary cap, and are we using that room wisely? And as you say, that's a perfect argument to have. Have we spent the salary cap wisely? And that's we don't know what anybody is on. That's fair enough. You could say, well, we're too heavy in second rowers. But if Sione goes, that's what Matt Whitley was brought in for. He's brought in as a replacement for Sione. Sione stays another year, maybe.
Listen, if you believe the stories go on the terraces, we went out and looked at Matt Whitley when we thought Sione was going home. So Matt Whitley was signed as Sione's replacement. Sione then changed his mind, decided he'd like to stay for another year or so. And obviously you didn't want to let somebody like Sione go.
Yeah,
and we chose the option of taking him and saying, listen, he'll play prop for us this year. And it solved that issue. And that's gone all right. And it'd be even better if Matt Whitley had stayed fit, unfortunately, with the injury. So potentially, if Sione goes, you've got that money where you don't need to replace Sione like for like, especially if you've got the likes of Noah coming through as well.
Yeah, and hopefully that's where we already know the answer as a club. Doesn't necessarily us. Listen, it'd be lovely if we did because it's all about perception, as I say, and timing of giving fans a boost with signings and re-signings and the likes. But if we already know what's going on with Sione, hopefully we know what salary cap we can now spend on that centre that can come in on the quarter and could come in and strengthen us, whether that be centre or wing. If we're still waiting about, then not that we need to push him into it, but we need to know sooner rather than later because it's a business. And no one player on that list is bigger than the club.
Somebody we've not mentioned who's going to have a squad number next season, Owen Dagnall and Deon Sambu. They're both potential wing options, whether that's for next season or the season after. That might potentially influence on the decision to offer John Bennison a deal as well. Because do you want that many fringe backs in your squad? And then the other thing to remember is for 2026 onwards, if you are looking at the likes of George Whitby, Harry Robertson, etc., being your future, Johnny Vaughan as well will want to get games at centre, maybe second row. These young lads aren't going to stay on cheap contracts forever. If they become first team regulars, they will want first team money.
Yeah. So if the plan is to tie these young lads down, what I would possibly do, and this is just kind of off the top of my head thought, is I would announce all the young lads, if we're going to tie them all down to new contracts, announce them at the same time as Paul Wellens and say this is the future. this is what we see the next 2 or 3 years being, and do it like that. Do it as a big, this is our vision, where you've got Harry Robertson, Owen Dagnall, George Whitby, Johnny Vaughan, whoever sat in front going, this is who we're keeping on, this is who we're signing, this is who we see taking us forward. If we're going to go through a transitional phase, then that's fine. It happens from time to time. I think we'll always be challenging up at the right end, but you kind of just want to know what's going on. I think from fans' perspectives, the club has just got to watch out that fans don't become frustrated with a lack of communication from the club.
Yeah, and I get that they don't want to say we're in transition because it sends out negative connotations that you're not in the hunt for trophies. But if that's the case, that's the case.
Yeah. I think fans are clever enough to read between the lines that if we brought in a winger and a centre, we'll say, on 2-year deals from, I don't know, I can't even think off the top of my head who you bring in, but you bring in an Aussie and you bring in an English centre from somewhere, and you think, we're just seeing if these go all right, and if they don't, then these are going to get jettisoned back off to where they came from. And you sign a load of youngsters up. I think fans are clever enough to understand that we're going to go through transition and do that. It's not like we're going to go out and sign like the Aussie starting centre, well, if they ever play International League. But you know what I mean? Like State of Origin centres, we're not going to go out and sign anybody like that. It just isn't going to happen. But fans know the nuances now. Fans see an awful lot and talk about an awful lot. So, yeah, I just hope the club realise that they need to make sure that communication is still there with the fans. You can't just go radio silence. The fact that we're not hearing any rumours whatsoever is slightly concerning. And I know you will always get people who, if you throw enough muck at a wall, some of it will stick. But you want to start knowing that we are looking for the right type of player with the right personality and the right skill set that will take us forward into 2025 and beyond.
Yeah. I will then on a positive. Look at what's in that starting 17 that's up there. There's an awful lot of very, very, very good rugby league players. If you can get them all on the field fit at the same time, and you add a sprinkling in the backs, we're not that far away, even in a transitional period. We're not going to do a Leeds.
Yeah, I mean, you say like them out of contract, as I say, I can see Blake getting a new deal, so he fills, we'll say, the number 2 shirt. I can see Corrie possibly getting a new deal, but then you definitely need a fast number 5. You need a rapid number 5 in that team, because you need to have that like Regan Grace style of elusive winger. We always had the pace and strength of Tommy on one side and Regan on the other, and that's probably when we looked one of the most balanced I've ever seen us wing wise. You need that on the other wing. You need that ability for someone just to change a game just by getting hold of the ball and making defenses question what's going to happen. And I hope we're in the market for someone like that.
Right. Happy Sunday. We'll probably do another one of these in another 6 weeks or so. When we've announced 4 world-class players coming into the team.
Yeah, hopefully so. Hopefully another positive one. Hopefully us not being too disillusioned in, as you say, 6 weeks' time, because again, we've not been linked with anyone. There's no re-signings, there's no signings on the horizon. You're just worried about kind of what's happening behind the scenes at the club.
I just genuinely believe there isn't that big of a market out there, and I especially for teams like us and Wigan who are competing at the top. I think Wigan were clever. They might have realised this, and they got all of their talent tied down. So Wigan aren't going to be active very much in the market over the next couple of years because their salary cap is all tied up.
Well, I think when you looked at the number of players who were off contract and the list of the players who were off contract when it got announced as it May the 1st, I had looked through that at anyone that you might think of signing. There wasn't an awful lot on there. Like you're looking through it thinking there isn't anyone. I'm thinking they're going to improve us. I think possibly the only one was Tom Davis, and that was because he was a winger. And he's gone to Hull KR. He was the one that you thought, well, yeah, he'd be able to carry the ball back, but pace about him, yeah, fair enough. But apart from that, I think we are looking at Aussies and maybe looking at bringing in a couple of imports, and that means you've got open quarter spaces.
Absolutely. Right, Kev. Back on Wednesday for the CAS preview show, Redvee TV show, and any other bits to discuss there and then. Let us know your comments below, and if any questions you've got, and we'll try and pick some up on Wednesday if we see them. Well, we will see them because we do read them. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Catch you soon.